Welcome to Cowgirl Talk, where we empower you to live authentically through real food, real talk, and real life. Sisters brought together by our love of cows. We're your host, Emily, a dairy lover and personal trainer living in Florida.
And Becca, a corporate cowgirl holding down the family fort in Pennsylvania. Let's go, cowgirls!
Hello, and welcome back to Cowgirl Talk. I am, and I know Becca is too, but we are just so excited for today's episode. We are going to be chatting with Courtenay Dehoff. She's a TV host, speaker, bucking bull mom, and one of my favorite things, creator of Fancy Lady Cowgirl. So when I started Dairy Girl Fitness, again, it was back in 2018, but in the realms of everyone kind of starting up and being in the ag world, I feel like Courtenay was one of the first women that I saw on social. I was like, wow, this girl is so cool. This is so awesome. The whole movement, because Becca said before this, we have our titles like cowgirl as two separate words. Courtenay is a real life cowgirl as one word. And I have just always really admired and loved what Courtenay has done in all aspects, but especially with her movement, Fancy Lady Cowgirl. And so we are so excited to be able to just chat with Courtenay today and kind of dive into all aspects of what she's doing, her movement. And we are just so thankful to have you on the show. So welcome to Cowgirl Talk, Courtenay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. You know, I was trying to remember, we ran into each other on the street at the NFR, I think in 2020. And
yes,
it was so fun to like meet you in real life. And Becca, it's so fun to meet you today. And I think, you know, like, I don't know how far into Dairy Girl Fitness you were, Emily, but like Fancy Lady Cowgirl had just sort of like become a thing. And so, yeah, we've come a long way.
Yeah, that was the year that NFR was in Fort Worth, Texas. And I think we were waiting for a reservation at a steakhouse. I think it's called B3 Steakhouse. And we saw like Courtenay walking out and I was like, oh my God. And so I fangirled so hard. So that was such a cool moment.
So fun.
Yes, but so everyone else can get to know you a little bit better, whether they have been following you for a while, maybe they're brand new to you and they're just getting introduced. Please just give a little bit of an introduction of yourself. We like to call this kind of like your fun elevator pitch, if you could say.
Oh, my elevator pitch. Yeah. So
it's okay if it's long or short.
No pressure. Yeah. So like, I like to say that I am a cowgirl turned television host who also is a motivational speaker that empowers women to like really live legendary through the cowgirl spirit. So how did this all come to be? I grew up fifth generation on my family's cow-calf operation. So like agriculture was all I knew, right? Like I was the little girl riding horses, you know, all I wanted to be was a cowgirl. Grew up rodeoing, showing cattle, all of those fun things. And then I went to Oklahoma State to compete on the rodeo team and was, you know, disappointed to learn you do have to also go to school while you're there. Not really. I love school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And they're like, well, you have to have a major. And so I majored in agricultural communications. And, you know, I took the writing classes and the graphic design and the photography. And I love all of those things. And I love to write. But it was really an internship that sort of like changed the course of my life. I landed an internship at a little local television station in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And to be honest, I needed the internship hours in order to graduate. And I thought it would be cool to see my face on TV. And so I was like, this sounds like an internship for me. But what I discovered is that I had a real love and passion for storytelling, you know, for sort of giving a voice to the voiceless and sharing stories. And you know, my executive producer was such a blessing because, you know, like a true internship, he made me do it all. He taught me to shoot and edit and write and, you know, do all of the behind the scenes things as well as the on camera things. And I fell in love with it. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I'm going to be a TV host, you know, sign, seal, deliver. That's all she wrote. And so I rodeoed throughout college. I continued working at that little TV station. You know, my internship, I don't know how long they last, like a couple months or something. And when it was over, he didn't take away my key that I used to get in. So I just kept it and I just literally kept showing up and he never said anything. And so I didn't say anything. And then one day, finally he came in and he's like, we got to talk. And I was like, dang it. Like this was so fun while it lasted. And he's like, I think it might actually be illegal for you to come here and not be paid. And I was like, well, I guess you'll have to pay me. And he's like, I guess I will. And so that's how I got my first TV job.
Oh my gosh.
I just sort of like forced my way in. I just kept showing up, you know, and graduated from OSU and, you know, landed my first TV job. And what I discovered in the world of mainstream television is that like a girl in a cowboy hat wasn't going to cut it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, agents and managers in the business that were like, what's your goal here? And, I wanted to be on TV in the biggest cities in America. I wanted to work in New York and LA and Dallas and all of these cool places. And they're like, well, you need to take the cowgirl hat off. Like, they'll think you're uneducated. Like, no one's going to take you seriously. And so my story really is ag kid, grew up agriculture, decided to pursue a career outside of agriculture. And largely for a decade, I hid that side of me, right? In order to fit into the world of television and entertainment and to be taken seriously in newsrooms, I put the cowboy boots and the cowboy hat away. And, it worked for a while, and I landed all of the jobs and I crushed all the goals and I got to interview all the famous people and I got to co-host and work alongside, household names. But like it wasn't fulfilling. And no matter how much money I was making, no matter how big the job title was, I was like, I know this is what I want to do, but like, why am I so unhappy? And it took me a really long time to realize that it was my roots, right? I was missing sort of that agriculture, that cowgirl side of my life. And so, I sort of just decided like, I wonder what would happen if I stepped back in. What if I lived a double life? What if I was like a double agent? Like I can still live in the big city and work in TV, but like on the weekends, what if I'm like going to rodeos and going to cattle shows? And like, what if in my spare time, I tell stories about things that are happening in agriculture? And so that's exactly what I did. I started editing together stories about, issues that were affecting ag that the people I was working for did not think were newsworthy. Like the mainstream media giants were like, okay, nobody cares what's happening in the flyover states. Like this is not going to get us ratings. We're not telling this story. And so I would share it on social media and they caught on and my following blew up and some of these stories went viral. And it was like this interesting, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can do both, except what the agriculture industry, who was resharing all of these stories and asking me to come and keynote speak at events. I didn't even know what a keynote speaker was. I was like, sure, I'll be there. What they didn't realize is that I didn't live the lifestyle. And so when agriculture sort of discovered that the girl that was telling these ag stories and was sort of fighting for agriculture didn't live it, they were like, whoa, like you couldn't possibly know what we're going through. You're not actually one of us. And so it was sort of this weird, like I didn't fully fit into the world of television entertainment, right? Because I'm a cowgirl, but I didn't actually fit into the world of agriculture anymore because I wasn't living the life. And that's how Fancy Lady Cowgirl was born, right? I just decided, you know what? I am done trying to please everyone. I'm going to be a fancy lady. I want to wear the fancy clothes and go to the fancy parties and walk the red carpets and be on TV and live in the fancy high rise. But I'm going to be a cowgirl, right? I'm going to live my life by those values and those things that I was raised with. And Fancy Lady Cowgirl really was just my way of turning like my mess into my message. And what I discovered is there were thousands of women from around the world who were like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for finally saying the way we've been feeling. We don't feel welcome in the agriculture industry either because of X, Y, and Z, or because, we were born in it and we left, or we are first generation and we don't feel qualified, And so it really just turned into this movement. And I was like, you know what? My life mission is going to be to empower women from all walks of life to embrace the cowgirl within, right? Because we all have a little cowgirl in us, whether we know anything about the lifestyle or not. Like it's about those values, courage, grit, resiliency, integrity. That's what makes a cowgirl. So that is my whole entire life story. That only took 18. No, I don't know how long. There you go.
8 minutes and 32 seconds. No.
Yeah.
One, let's just take the time to do a collective boo for the people who at the TV station who wanted agriculture to happen, and then our fellows in agriculture who would only allow someone with the full story. And that, I think that's something that's going to be super relatable for a lot of kids in ag who have tried to figure
even for
out,
us,
how to toe the line of both. And honestly, I feel like they might have just been jealous of your outfits or your blazers, which are absolutely
so cool.
Fire, as the kids say.
Thank you.
And you started to get into this, and I want to dig in a little bit deeper, but like you said, your Instagram tells us that you're empowering women to live legendary through the cowgirl spirit. So you've gone from cowgirl to city girl to now kind of acting as the liaison between the two.
Ooh.
So can you just tell us more about, like, in the day-to-day how that looks?
Yeah, no, great question. And, Fancy Lady Cowgirl happened very organically. And it really
Mm-hmm.
started as a hashtag. I
Yeah.
actually like went on this like Instagram rant because I was so just like fed up with trying to fit everyone else's expectations. And this post, all it said was, you can live in the biggest cities in America and still advocate for ag. That hat on your head does not define you. The shoes on your feet do not determine your worthiness of being a voice for the industry. And I just like went on and on and on. And really, it just like was a way to make me feel better. I probably should have gone and seen a therapist instead, but like I just like put it on Instagram. And at the very bottom, I wrote hashtag Fancy Lady Cowgirl. And that was really how it was born. And this was 2020. So I had a lot of time on my hands,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because the pandemic was raging at this point. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Dallas in my, this high rise. And I was like, what am I going to do? Because I have no work. I'm an independent contractor at this point. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I just like leaned into this Fancy Lady Cowgirl thing. Like, what would happen if I just continued to post about this? Because what I had experienced, was that like, yeah, I felt not welcome in the ag industry. But I also, on the other side of that, was feeling so fulfilled. And I was feeling like I had a greater purpose, finally. I was no longer just reading the words in the box on TV that someone else had written, but like I was really making a difference in an industry. And the agriculture industry as a whole is largely good. It's full of wonderful people,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just the like naysayers are always a little bit louder. And so I just started sharing more and more about it, just the things that were like, made me excited and brought me joy. I have always loved fashion. I remember like as a little girl, like looking at the fashion magazines and wanting to look like the women, on the streets in New York. And then I remember as I got older, like traveling to Europe and just seeing these women, and it was understated, but like they were just radiating confidence. And I was like, dang, like looking back, I'm like, that's cowgirl, right? Like they were carrying themselves like cowgirls. They didn't have on a hat or boots or anything, but it was that confidence and that courageousness. And I was like, I want to exude that. And so one of the ways that I've always enjoyed doing that is through fashion, right? And so like early on, Fancy Lady Cowgirl, I was like, I want to do photo shoots. Like no, Vogue's not calling. No magazines are like asking me to come pose for photos, but like, wouldn't it be cool? What if I just took my own? And so my very first like Fancy Lady Cowgirl photo shoot was just me and my best friend on her iPhone. We went to a cutting barn here in Weatherford and like we just took pictures, but it was like fancy clothes in a barn setting, right? And I used those photos to like create that tension, that juxtaposition that made people stop and go, wait, what are we looking at? Like, why is she in a gown in a stall barn, like cleaning a stall? Like, that doesn't make sense. And so I used photos to sort of demonstrate that like you can be both, right? You can be a fancy lady and a cowgirl, you can embody qualities of both. And so photos, things like that. And then eventually Fancy Lady Cowgirl morphed into, I do a yearly event, where I invite anywhere from 100 to 150 women to come and spend a couple of days listening to great speakers, workshops, and just really being empowered. Because for me, I looked back at my TV career, and even in the hardest moments, and the television industry is volatile. I mean, it is a cutthroat, volatile industry, and even in those toughest moments, it was the cowgirl in me that got me through it, right? And so I'm like, man, if I can teach other women to channel those cowgirl qualities to get through whatever they're going through in life so that they can come out on the other side and have this big, beautiful, legendary life and career, then like I'm doing something that matters. And so that's kind of the evolution of it. And it's just been incredible. My first international event was this year in Australia, and I had no idea what to expect. And, I learned a lot about the Australian culture, and they're not quite as proud and in your face as Americans are. Like when we're doing something good, we're like, yeah, look at me, like, whatever. And so I learned, that the women were really sort of struggling to own it and to own their power and own their career and own the things that they were doing. And so I just like gave, this speech, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to hit or not. And I remember like, about halfway through, I sort of made eye contact with my table, which was like the family that was hosting me, and they've become family, and they're just like there's just weeping, and I was like,
Aww.
like, I hope this is, and I'm doing is this a good weep or is this a bad weep? But that's why I do it. It's to inspire and to empower, and it's really to help other women not waste 10 years of their life. It wasn't a waste for me because it had to happen that way for me to get to this point. But I don't want any other woman to spend a decade trying to find the courage to just be who she is. And so I try to set the example through Fancy Lady Cowgirl that you just have to do you.
Oh man, I always get like so fired up when I get to have these conversations in general, but hearing more of your story, right? Because I don't remember how I found you even, or, how anyone finds anyone on social, but I remember the start of it, of that Fancy Lady Cowgirl just being a hashtag. And I know even from my end, it was just like the permission, right? To show up as you are in agriculture, and that's good enough, whether that's in dairy, whether that's in Western, whether that's in poultry, like whatever aspect it is, right? Like you were saying, I think so many people try to gatekeep their own industries. And I know agriculture often tries to do that, which, we hold it true to our hearts. It's a very small industry. It's something that a lot of people may not understand. But I think you, like Becca said, you're like a liaison, right? You allow people to see two different types of it, and allows us to reach other people, which I think is so impactful. And I have to say, I feel like you're part of the reason I felt confident enough to buy a cowgirl hat or a cowboy hat in Texas when I was there. I'm not confident enough to like wear it a ton, but
wear it. You've got to wear it.
I'm in Gainesville, Florida, and I'm just like, I'm gonna look so ridiculous if I wear this here.
You'll look less ridiculous than you will in Altoona, Pennsylvania, but Altoona, Pennsylvania could use a little more of the cowgirl spirit. So
there you go. There you go. You girls got to bring it. You got to bring it.
I know. And along with the fashion and such, and I know you were kind of talking through it, but I want to know if the name Fancy Lady Cowgirl, if there was just like a night or a moment you're like, oh yes, like this is so it, this is the hashtag, or this is the movement. And when you also realize after that, you could turn it into, even now, a business, right? Because there is a lot of difference between, okay, I'm going to post about it on social, which is fabulous, but to then turn it into an actual business, that's a whole different ballgame. So I would love to hear kind of how you got there, and even maybe what it looked like when you first started it to how it evolved to like, what's it look like now to what you originally thought it could be.
Yeah, for sure. So many great questions. Yeah, Fancy Lady Cowgirl is kind of a bizarre, like, term, and I don't actually share how I came up with it that often, and I don't know why. So growing up, I was just a cowgirl. Like that is all I knew. That was all I was. I grew up riding horses, ranching. That was it. Life was a cowgirl, and I remember. I don't even know how old I was, but my mom and her best childhood friend, I think we were visiting her, and I think we were in Phoenix. I think the Phoenix Zoo is fairly well known. Anyway, we go to the zoo, and my mom is one of those people like, we're not buying food at the zoo. We're not buying toy. Like that's a waste of money. We're not doing any of that. Well, my mom's friend, she bought me this princess hat, like from the zoo gift shop, which is like a big deal because like we don't spend money on that kind of stuff. And she put it on my head. And I remember as a little girl, she looked at me and she goes, now you're a fancy lady. And that was the first time I think as a little girl that I realized I could be more than one thing. I think that was the first time, that someone had pointed out, like, you're a cowgirl always, but you can be a fancy lady too. And so literally, life goes on. I never think about that again. And then for some reason, when I was having this 10-year struggle of like, how can I be part of both? I thought, oh my God, I learned at the zoo that day, you can be more than one thing, right? I think so often as women, we get put in a box, right? In the mom box or in the fitness coach box or in the cowgirl box. And it's like, that's it. That's the lane. Stay in your lane. Don't get out of your lane. And so Fancy Lady Cowgirl was sort of just a nod to that little girl. And a brand coach once told me, he said, you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. Mm-hmm. And when I think about what I'm doing with Fancy Lady Cowgirl, I'm serving that little girl, right? That little cowgirl who maybe dreamt of being something else and wanted to be more than just a cowgirl. Like I'm serving all of those little girls. I'm serving all of the women that we became through Fancy Lady Cowgirl. And yeah, there was no plan for it to turn into a brand or anything. And then, the question of like, how do you turn it into a brand, from a brand to like a business? And to be honest, like, I don't even know what to call Fancy Lady Cowgirl. I'm like, it's a brand movement. It's a business. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's a community. But it just slowly happened organically, right? Like, a friend was like, you should have an event. I'm like, I have no idea how would I have an event? I don't even know what that would look like. And she sort of came on board that first year and helped me host my first event, and we sold tickets, and it was this incredible experience. And, I learned a lot. And then the following year I hosted an event and then another one. And that sort of grew from there. I have a merch line, nothing fancy, just like t-shirts and stickers, but
I still have my shirt.
Yes. And like, I remember, you guys, like the very first thing I did was stickers, and they were like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they cost. $1.20, like my price. Right. And I had to buy 50 to get the price break. And I was like, this is probably the end of Fancy Lady Cowgirl. This is where I go bankrupt. I will never be able to financially recover from this. And I remember I called my mom and dad, and I was like, what do you think about me ordering stickers? And my dad's like, well, if worse comes to worse and like nobody buys them, you could give them to your friends for Christmas. I was like, great. So I'm going to financially be ruined, but everyone's going to have cool Christmas presents. And I remember I put them online. Like, I didn't know how to make a website, nothing. Like, I'm clueless. Or maybe I sold them on Instagram. I don't even know. And I sold all 50 in that first night. And then I had to hand address and stamp every envelope, and I wrote little thank you notes. And like, it started there, right? And then it just sort of grew over time. It's like, how do you expand the merchandise line? How do you expand the events? How do I turn Fancy Lady Cowgirl into like speaking opportunities, right? Like, I've had the opportunity to speak all over the world and just really empower, like I said, women from all walks of life. But yeah, it started small. It took a lot of courage. I've created what I call the Cowgirl Code. I was sitting on a plane headed to a speaking event, and I was like, what does it mean to be a cowgirl? Because to me, being a cowgirl is not riding a horse. It's not working, living, ever even having been on a ranch. Like, to me, it's the values by which you live your life. And I'm like, okay, so what are like the 6 principles of being a cowgirl that I think lead to a legendary life? And I just wrote COWGIR, and I started with courage, right? Like, I think cowgirls are courageous. Women who embody the cowgirl spirit are courageous. Originality, right? You have to be yourself. You cannot show up as anybody other than who you were created to be. Take it from someone who did that for 10 years. You will never be fully fulfilled in your life until you are just your own original self and you tap into your originality. Worthiness, W. I think a lot of times as women, we may not realize it, but we don't really believe that we're worthy of achieving our biggest dreams. We don't really believe that we're worthy of building the business and launching the brand and having the huge success. You have to accept that you are worthy of doing what it is that lights you up inside, right? Grit, I think cowgirls are really gritty. Integrity, right? Like, a handshake means something. You treat people with respect. Like, that is so much a part of the cowgirl agriculture code. And then, resiliency, right? Like, you got to be really resilient, and you have to stay true to who you are, and you have to keep showing up, and you have to keep fighting for what you believe in. And those were sort of, I think, the 6. I was trying to spell the word in my head. I might have missed a few. But like, those are the like principles that I think lead, to like legendary, right? Oh. The last letter of cowgirl is L, legendary. And for me, Fancy Lady Cowgirl was like really when my like most fulfilled life began. Like, opportunities that I never could have imagined started coming my way. I had the opportunity, through Fancy Lady Cowgirl, and even it just started on social media, to meet the most phenomenal people that I never would have crossed paths with. And so, yeah, I'm just, out here encouraging all women to just, embody those cowgirl qualities in some way.
I am so happy you said that you don't have to ride a horse to be a cowgirl.
I've ridden it like 3 times.
I am respectfully terrified of those magnificent creatures.
And that is okay. That is okay. That's the big thing for me about Fancy Lady Cowgirl, right? Like, I don't care if you own a cowboy hat. I don't care if you own a pair of boots. I don't care if you live in New York City and you've never been on a farm or ranch, but you hear this and you're like, hell yeah. Like, I want to be courageous. I want to do that. You get to be a cowgirl. Like, and that's been one of the things that I've really has been the through line of everything that I've done, whether it's my TV work, my speaking, Fancy Lady Cowgirl, my sort of consistent through line is a cowgirl is a state of mind. It is not just a job, right? It is so much more than an occupation. I think being cowgirl is a state of mind. So you two are definitely cowgirls. I hereby, it's like being knighted. I like swear
Yes.
you into the
Like,
cowgirl club.
I tip your hat.
I need a pair of
for-
blue Casey's for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, right. Any excuse to go shopping. Like, sorry, honey,
I want a pair.
I'm a cowgirl. I need new boots. But
Exactly.
Christmas.
with such an original and unique idea, this vision that you've created that is Fancy Lady Cowgirl, I can imagine you faced a lot of criticism along the way. I mean, you even faced criticism in the beginning before you even knew Fancy Lady Cowgirl would exist. So how have you remained confident and steadfast in Fancy Lady Cowgirl and pursuing it? And as Emmy says, how do you block out the haters?
Yeah, I typed that out specifically. I was
Block
like,
out the haters.
And the haters. And the haters are so loud too. Like, you know,
so annoying.
The
yeah,
loudest.
the haters are always like 10 times as loud as
they're so
everyone
mean.
else. They are so mean. You know, I've had to do a lot of self-reflection, and I've had to, you know, I've tried everything in the book. I've tried to fight back. I've tried to, you know, outsmart them. I've tried to whatever. None of it works. You know, for me, I have really had to adopt the mindset when it comes to the haters that that is a reflection of them, right? And I say this to anyone listening, like, we're not just talking cowgirls at this point. Like, you know, that is a reflection of that person. It is a reflection of their struggles, their fears, their insecurities, something that they're going through. You know, I think it was Tom Holland, the actor. It was like viral for a while. He's quoted in an interview and they ask him something similar. He's like, they're like, how do you deal with all the like crazy people and the haters? And he's like, unless you have my phone number and you can personally text or call me to have a discussion with me about the problem that you have, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And I'm like, ooh, that is so good.
I love that.
Because to answer your question, Becca, like, yeah, they came for me, especially in the beginning. I think now I'm like, maybe I'm more confident in my message, or maybe like my brand, you know, is solidified enough and I know what it represents, and the majority of my followers know what it represents. But I mean, everything. They would screenshot, you know, photos of me like doing a photo shoot, and like, you know, the post would just be about how great cowgirls are, and they would screenshot it and reshare it and be like, this woman is single-handedly ruining the agriculture industry. She's destroying, you know, traditions. She's blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one of the arguments I get a lot when I'm like, look, a cowgirl is more than a job. I think a cowgirl is a state of mind. They're like, oh, okay, well then I guess, you know, I'm a doctor. It's a state of mind.
Oh my gosh.
The thing is,
It's impossible.
you can't argue with these people. You know,
No.
like
Yeah.
you can't. There are going to be people that love you and there are going to be people that hate you.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if you don't have haters, you're not doing anything big enough, right? Like, if there are not people pushing back on your message or your dream or what you represent, then you're probably not doing something big enough. You're not doing something that truly matters. And so, you know, for me, I just have to stay really true to, like, I know how being a cowgirl and being even the tiniest bit a part or embodying that way of life, I know how it can change someone's life. And so that's why I will continue to fight and continue to make more people feel like they have a seat at the table. I mean, you guys know this as well as I do. Like, this industry is dying, right?
Yep.
You know, it is not growing at the rate that it needs to sustain, you know, feeding the world and doing all of the great things that the agriculture and Western industries do. And it just baffles me that we are gatekeeping this. We need people from all walks of life. We need people who do not look like us. We need people who think completely different. We need people on the left and on the right and in the middle. We need all of these people in the agriculture industry. And so that's largely a part of Fancy Lady Cowgirl as well, right? Like, I decided, you know what? I'm going to sit at the table and I'm going to sit there alone as long as it takes until people decide that they want to join me. And so, yeah, I mean, the haters are loud. You know, they've made me cry on many occasions. Never, you know, I never let them see me cry. Don't ever let them see me cry. Like sometimes the stuff is so crazy and
It's
so
wild.
out there.
Yeah.
But I think too, and this is not a good thing, but I think now social media, the political scene in this, everyone has completely lost their minds. So like now when people are mean, I'm like, well, I'm just one of the many that they
Yeah, like,
What
You
did
know,
I'm not special.
what did
yeah, like I hate to put it that way, but I'm like, I don't feel as unique now because
Yeah.
everybody hates everybody. So I might as
Yeah.
well just do me.
what did Mike Tyson say? It was when the whole Jason Kelsey thing went down. I saw a quote
Oh,
from
with like
Mike.
the phone thing?
Yeah, because he was
Okay.
saying some not very nice things and
Yeah.
filming it like it's the filming. But
Oh, I remember
it
this,
was
yeah.
a quote, and Mike Tyson don't come from me, but it was like, social media has taught people they can say whatever they want without being punched in the face, essentially.
Yeah, like without consequences.
Yeah, without consequence. And I think there is an unfair confidence, or maybe like an unjustified confidence that
Yes.
people have to be mean, to say things that they wouldn't typically say if one, you knew the person and actually had a vested interest at what's best for them, or if you were face to face, like, are you really gonna call me that? Whenever,
Yeah.
like, how would this conversation go in real life? Would you have the confidence or the urge to say this? So social media has definitely given them that unjustified right to be a jerk.
Has. Yeah, it really has. You know, and one thing that I have learned that does help, and it looking back drastically slowed it down. Not always, but like drastically slowed it down on my end, is if you call them out. And I don't mean like sending a private, like, hey, that really hurt my feelings. You want to be wild up in my DMs? Great. I am going to screenshot it with your full name, your full handle, the name of your ranch, the name of your 6 children, you know, your bio that says, you know, love your neighbor as, you know,
like
it's
God first. And then
and
like,
I will, and I want to, and this is so petty. So like, don't do this. I'm not saying your audience to do this. But like, I will repost some of that stuff. I'll be like, oh, you have a business in the agriculture space, and this is how you're treating each other. Well, let me tell everyone about your business, and I will screenshot it, post it, and I will tag them to ensure that they see it. And you know what? It slows it down because other people see that and they're like, oh my God, that crazy Courtenay girl, like you can be mean to her, but she will put that on blast for the whole, you know, because to your point, Becca, it's like, there are no consequences anymore, right? And I'm like, oh, you want to play that game with me? Like, let's go. I'll play the game. Like I will, you know, and it's a fine line because you're like, okay, did they just want the attention that I gave them, or did this really, like, you know, slow them down? And sometimes it does. You know, I'll have people message and they're like, oh man, we were having a bad day. We shouldn't. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Very petty of me, but it brings me great joy. My mom's always like, she'll see me like go to start doing like posting, and she's like, you need just you know, someone else's business about you is not your, or someone else's opinion about you is not your business. I'm like, oh, she made it my business today. She made it my business today.
Sometimes it feels good just to let the pettiness out. And again, like you said, it's a fine line, maybe not all the time, but I even made a reel over the weekend, and it was one that, you know, is controversial and people disagree, but then some people got like so nasty and mean. And there was one account that shared it, just talking shit on me, like telling me I'm a bad person, bad coach. Like I don't care about people. And I should not have responded. I shouldn't have responded. I was like, all I said was though, I was like, oh, awesome. Like, thanks for assuming you know everything about me based on one post. She's like, I know everything I need to. And then I was like, this was stupid. Because then she started talking about me even more in her story. And she sent all of her cronies after me. And so I didn't even read the responses. I deleted it. I was like, this is literally getting me nowhere. And then I blocked her. And I know then, because Ruben went on to look at her page, I know she was talking shit afterwards. But I was like, you know what? Sometimes you have to check as well. Like, is this worth my sanity? Because why do I care? Yeah, okay, sure, this girl and her follower hates me now. Cool. But those aren't the people I'm trying to reach. Those aren't the people that you can have a conversation with. And I feel like that's something we need to remember as well, is that when you're pushing your message, you're going to reach the right crowd and you're going to reach the crowd that disagrees with you very, very strongly. But like you said earlier, I think it goes to show that you're standing for something. And again, people might think that's like not good or wrong, but I think it's it's just still an important thing to remember of where you can continue to keep that confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And like, you know, your example is like a prime example. I mean, that kind of stuff happens to me more frequently than I would care to admit. And
Yeah.
you have to sit back too and think, okay, what type of people are following that person? That they continue to follow someone who is hateful and who is attacking a perfect stranger. And you sort of have to just like dust your hands off and be like, you know what? Good riddance. You don't want her followers, right? Like,
No.
and you don't need her as a follower. And I think at the end of the day, just like blocking those people really is. I mean, I have gotten ruthless with my blocking.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not
life's
worth
too
my
short.
peace.
Go be mean to somebody else.
Literally. Yeah. And maybe this is also petty, but I'm like, y'all are losers.
The only person
sure.
who is allowed to be mean to Emily is her sister.
There you go.
We can be mean to each other, and that's real. No.
Yeah. And we mean it.
Yeah. Oh man, but it's just it is literal Wild West out there. But kind of switching gears on that, and I love your insight on that because everyone's a little bit different, right? I think it's important to stay true to who you are, but also sometimes it's okay to let the fiery, sassy side out. But another area that I would love to hear a little bit more on, because you have had such a cool journey of being able to reach different people, being able to go to different events, literally travel to different countries, and all of the things that you've gotten to do, whether that's like events you've hosted, places you've gotten to speak, or experiences of like hosting and speaking to bull riders and different things like that. What is maybe one of your favorite, and I know that's so hard to narrow it down, but when I say that, like one of your favorite or even one of your most surprising or kind of random things almost, or experiences that Fancy Lady Cowgirl has led you to?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think I mentioned it earlier, but like it's always an honor to get on stage and to share, you know, my message with women and to really empower them. And but you know, getting on a 17-hour flight in DFW to go to Australia was definitely like bucket list. You know,
Yeah.
I'd always hoped that maybe I would get to speak internationally, but like I didn't know what that would look like. And I really don't pitch myself. I sort of, the speaking engagements, I've been really blessed, like kind of come to me. And, you know, Australia had been about a year in the making. The National Cutting Horse Association in Australia had reached out and they're like, hey, it's our 50th anniversary, Jubilee anniversary, like our big futurity. Like we'd love to, bring you out and maybe to speak and like do some interviews, at the cutting. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me know. And because I didn't want to get excited, right? Because like, oh my gosh, this could be so cool. Like I've never been to Australia. And it just, we worked on it for a year and it just really exceeded my expectations. I got to the venue that evening and it was this beautiful, they'd put together this beautiful event because I was like, look, I don't live in Australia. Like you guys have to plan this. It's just too hard for me to plan it, but I'll come, I'll speak, I'll do the things. And it was at this beautiful venue. And I also was a little bit like, what if nobody buys a ticket to this, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I knew like I was pretty sure I had a couple Australian like followers or people who knew who I was from Australia, but like that's a really long ways away. I'm like, okay, so like what if, and they're like 15-hour time difference, right? So like everything's a shit show trying to like figure out. So I remember they're like sending me the link. They're like, okay, the tickets are going on sale at this time. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what time that is, but like I'll figure it out. And so I went to bed and they had posted like the ticket link to come to this dinner. It was a sit down dinner. And then I was speaking. That was it. Like, come listen to this American girl speak about cowgirl, I'm like, oh my God, like, I hope somebody I'm going to have to fly my mom. I'm going to have to fly people in to like fill this thing up. And so I got up the next morning and I was like, okay, like, I think the tickets are on sale. I need to share the link. Like, cause maybe if I can get it in front of my following, then, we can really like push it out and maybe get some tickets sold. And so I went to their page to like copy and paste the link and it was sold out.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, wait, I like emailed them and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I haven't even shared this yet. And they're like, we're going to see if we can squeeze in a few more seats.
Oh
like
my gosh.
we're going to see if we can open up like, I don't remember, like 15 or 20 more seats. And then I had like Australians, they were messaging me and they're like, like, what in the world? We didn't get a ticket. And it was just like this incredible moment because I was like, oh my gosh, like this does matter. Like maybe I am making a difference, right? Because you girls know, like you get so sucked into your like day to day. You get so sucked into the nasty messages on Instagram. You get so sucked into like the mean comments or like not getting invited to Western events or whatever it is. Like you get sucked into this, like why, sometimes you wonder like, why am I even doing this? And I think this whole Australia experience, I was like, holy cow, like this message reached clear to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And it also was really eye-opening that we're all way more alike than we are different, right? Like completely different cultures. I mean, yes, we, the Australians luckily speak the same language. That made the speaking event a lot easier. But very different cultures and just very different upbringings and all the things. But man, I got in that room and it was the most incredible group of women. And I met so many amazing ladies and they shared so many incredible stories. And I'm just so thankful to the NCHA in Australia for that opportunity. So that was definitely a highlight to take Fancy Lady Cowgirl to Australia. But there's been so many cool moments in my journey, in my career, keynoting the National FFA convention.
That was so cool.
Wild. I mean, that was insane. And, it was the same thing. Like they reached out and they're like, hi, we're with the National FFA, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm super familiar with FFA. Like anything for this organization is a yes. Like I don't ask any questions. I'm like, yep, whatever you need, I will do it. And we go back and forth a few times on emails and they're like, okay, we're going to get you on a call to like meet the team, blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget this like look of horror on their faces. And we're on this call and I'm like, okay, awesome. Like I can give a keynote. They're like, you've got 20 minutes. You got to give it twice, blah, blah, blah. You're on the, stage at the convention. I've never been to the national convention. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, so what number am I? And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, what number keynote speaker? Am I like the 5th keynote speaker? I'm like like what? And they sort of all just like got real silent and they're like, you're it. You're the one. And I was like, oh,
it's all you.
Shoot. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, shit, like maybe I should have maybe researched this a little more. And I'm like, okay, so like, crowd size, they're like 65,000. I was like, oh.
It's that big?
Over 2 days, it's a total of 65,000. They fill half of Lucas Oil Stadium twice. And I was like, I'm a professional. This is like, no problem. I'm like, oh my God. And so the first thing I did, I was like, I'm just going to Google past keynote speeches and I'll just like copy those. It'll be easy. And so I Google, first person that comes up is George H.W. Bush as the president of the United States. And I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like, that must have been like a one-off, right? And so I'm Googling all the people and I'm like, they messed up. They accidentally asked me. Now they can't take, I was spiraling and I'll never forget walking into that stadium. The show was already going on. And it's like being at a football game, like the lights and the camera. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my hands were trembling and I was like, I'm either going to go out there and crush it or I'm going to go out there and have a heart attack. There's going to be no in between. And luckily I didn't have a heart attack. I don't know if I crushed it, but I did it. And, it was well received. But that was cool. And to just be able to talk to so many incredible kids. And it really gave me a lot of hope and excitement for the future of ag, because they're going to take care of us, because those kids are well-spoken. They get it. They're ambitious. They're courageous. They embody the cowgirl and cowboy spirit. And it was really cool. So those are just two of the highlights.
So cool.
I think, first of all, the FFA National Convention is a wild place. They have
I need to go.
The biggest country stars that come and sing. So I can't even imagine. Once you started telling that story, I was like, oh, she had no idea. She had no idea what that was.
Oh, no, clueless. And I honestly, it wasn't until this year, I had been doing some like virtual speaking with one of their like groups within FFA and this ag pioneer group. And so I would get on like every quarter or something and just like chat. And it was a small group. There might be like 8 of us on, whatever. And I would like, pump them up and talk about ag and whatever. And I loved it. It was a wonderful experience. And I was so thankful to be involved with FFA. And I actually met up with that group and did some other things with FFA this year. And I said, how did my name ever get brought up for this national FFA thing? Because I'd never really thought about it. And they were like, because you didn't know it, but the people who select the speakers for the national FFA convention, they were on some of those pioneer calls. And they were just hidden, just listening in, and like, I'm just doing my thing, whatever. And I thought, wow. And I think that's such a good reminder for us all. And for listeners, you got to keep showing up, because you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching, and you never know what opportunity may be coming your way, right? And I just think that that's, that's kind of cool. Like you just show up to things and you do what you're passionate about, and then the right opportunities will find you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, our last question to wrap it up before we get into our obsession was about what kind of advice can you give? And I feel like you just gave
Yeah, I
killer
know. I was like, wow, that leads
advice.
so well into it.
But I mean, if there's anything else that throughout this journey, because I think a lot of the people listening, people at your Australia event, or even a lot of these FFA kids or these younger women or younger men, if they listen to us, raise your hand.
What's up?
But
Hey.
what advice? I mean, a lot of them I think will be in a similar position that you've been in or that Emmy and I have been in, is that not everyone farms. 2% of the United States is farmers feeding the rest of the population, right? We're going to have to find a way to have a career and a life that fulfills us. That might not be what we thought it was, or it might be kind of towing that line between city and country. So I guess what other advice do you have to making that happen that's worked for you?
Yeah, that's so good. I'm going to Oklahoma City tomorrow to the National Cowboy Hall of Fame to speak to junior high and high school students about careers in ag. And so I thought a lot about this. And what I realized is that, like, there is a path for you in agriculture, right? If you can't find the opportunity that fits your passion and your skills and the things that, you love to do, like, create it. Because that's really what I did, right? I sort of created these opportunities. Now I'm doing television, primarily Western sports. But when I graduated from Oklahoma State, there were not TV jobs, right, in Western sports, because it just hadn't grown to what it is. And so I sort of wiggled my way back into the Western scene through speaking. And then that allowed me to then have the exposure to land some of these bigger Western sports, broadcasting opportunities. One of the things that I share in all of my keynotes, and it's a phrase that I remind myself every day, and I think it's so powerful: don't confuse your intermission for your finale.
Ooh.
I think so often there are experiences that we have in life. You don't land the dream job. You land the dream job and you lose it. The opportunity passes you by. The relationship fails. The business crumbles. Entrepreneurship, it doesn't work out the first 15 times, right? There's so many things in life that we're like, that's it. That's it. Like that was the end goal. That was the end game. But what we don't realize is that oftentimes that's just the intermission that's leading to something else. You think about a film or a great play or a great Broadway show. If you give up and you get up and you leave in the middle, you miss the best part, right? And I think life is that way too. So if you're listening, maybe you're in a high season, maybe you're in a really low season. Every morning that you wake up with breath in your lungs, it means that your story's not over. There is more coming. And so I just encourage people in the hard moments, remember, it might just be an intermission. It might be an intermission on the way to something that you could never even see coming. And I'm going to jump the gun and I'm going to go into your next question, because here's a perfect example of this. 2020, I landed my dream job. 2020, January of 2020, I land a broadcasting job with the PBR, the Professional Bull Riders. And it kind of happened quick. I had been emailing them once a month for 6 months. They never responded. And on month 7, I got an email that said, hey, we have a position opening up. We're going to fly you to Colorado Springs. We want to interview you. We'll see if you're a fit. I flew in, flew out, same day, and they hired me to do some sideline reporting on their Unleash the Beast tour. My very first gig was Madison Square Garden.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, holy, you know what? Like, this is a big deal. And so I remember my dream had always been to be on television in New York. Early on in my career, they're like, never going to take a girl in a cowboy hat seriously on real television. Like, you'll never make it to New York. Here I am. I walk into Madison Square Garden, 3 nights, sold out crowd, and I get to interview the best bull riders in the world. And, we're on live for like 3 to 4 hours. I mean, it was incredible. And it was just like this wild experience. And I was like, I have made it. This is the finale. This is the finale. And we went from Madison Square Garden, to other events around the country. And I was just loving it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I was meant to do. Like storytelling, but I'm getting to wear my cowboy hat and I'm getting to be in cowboy boots. And that was it. How does it get any cooler than Madison Square Garden?
Yeah.
And this is January of 2020. So my dream job lasted 3 whole months. And they canceled all of the events. They can't sell tickets. They can't have events. They canceled all the events, sidelined everything. I never worked for the PBR again. They never called again. And I was crushed. I was so devastated. I was like, that was it. That was the finale, right? Like there will never be anything cooler than that. I've waited 30 years to stand in New York and be on TV. And then in July of that year, not a lot going on. I get a message on Instagram, a DM request. I didn't even know there was a DM request folder until 2020, right? And it's this girl named Katie. And it was like, hey, exclamation point. We saw you on TV with the PBR. We raised for charity calves. We're wondering if you would like to own a bucking bull. And I'm like, am I being punked? Like, this is so stupid. Because, I can interview bull riders, but I didn't know anything about like being a contractor, the breeding side, nothing. I grew up in Angus show cattle world, bucking bull world, very different.
Yeah.
And I said, no. Katie says I ghosted her. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I said, no, thanks. Don't ever contact me again. And eventually I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out to their place and I'm going to make sure they're legit. I have no idea this bull had 4 legs. I was like, great. He looks like a great one. I have no idea. But it was this little white, ugly bull named Top Dollar. And he was standing in the back. I mean, he didn't want anything to do with us. And I remember looking at Katie and Laramie and I said, why me? And they said, well, we watched you on TV and we think that you would be a good partner. And we really want to show people that women can be involved in the bull business. And yeah. Yes. And I mean, they talk about good salesmen. Laramie had done this research. I was like, fine, I'm in. I said, okay, I'm in. And so I agreed to do this. And I remember the last thing I sort of said before I left their place that day, I was like, Laramie, I want to be able to pet this bull. And Laramie was very polite. And instead of rolling his eyes into the back of his head in front of me, I'm sure he did it when I left. And he was like, I don't know about that. And Katie's like, we'll see what we can do. And I mean, I give all credit to Katie. Laramie gets none. Top Dollar is now a 1,600-pound pet. He loves naps and scratches and snacks, and he adores little kids. And it's been this incredible journey. That first year, he became a world champion, our first, year as a partners in the ABBI, and then eventually made his PBR debut. I mean, you guys know it's kind of a crapshoot. You never know if they're going to work out. And
yeah,
as cool as that job with the PBR was, as cool as being on TV in Madison Square Garden was, it was even cooler 2 years ago to watch my bull make his Madison Square Garden debut.
Ooh,
yeah.
Full circle
moment.
I love
it. It was. And that's such a prime example of sometimes what you think is the finale, what you think is the dream, what you think is the goal really isn't the goal or the dream at all, because there's something even bigger or something even cooler coming your way. And so I just leave your audience, with that. Don't confuse the intermission for the finale. Embrace whatever season you're in and know that something else is coming. If you simply have the courage to show up, things will happen. Think back to that first internship. When my internship ended, if I hadn't had the courage to just keep showing up because I had a key and could do it, I wouldn't be here, today. And so I just encourage them, keep showing up, keep fighting for what you believe in, embody the cowgirl spirit, and don't confuse the intermission for the finale.
Yay! Oh my gosh, I love all that. And yeah, it's you don't know what you don't know, right? I think so often it can feel scary, you can feel stuck, but again, you don't know what pops up. And I feel throughout this whole thing, right, as long as you are, and I know it's easier said than done, but when you're authentic to yourself, when you do try to at least go after a path, right, whether it's not the dream job or whatever, just go after somewhat of that vision, it's going to land you closer to where you want to be and, eventually get you into where you feel yeah, this is it. And that may change as you go through life. And I feel that's the beauty of your journey, is that you can evolve and you can change throughout that. And I think as well for everyone, when Courtney's like, oh, hey, I'm jumping ahead to the next question. So we were going to our kind of, we'll do our weekly hot take obsession. And I told her earlier, like, we use those words loosely, but as we're all in agriculture, animal ag in different ways, it was like, okay, who's your favorite cow, bull, or horse? And it was really just so Courtney could talk about Top Dollar, because I love following him on social media. And it is so funny to watch him kind of be a big pet, because Beck and I are in the dairy cow world, right? They're big. I mean, they're big animals too, but they're just different. They're not as bulky as the bulls are. So it's really fun to get to see that side of it.
Yep.
Yeah, he's been a lot of fun. And that was kind of one of the things we agreed on early on in our partnership. Katie and Laramie were like, we'd like you to share your journey on social media with him. And I was like, all right, bet. We have documented that poor bull's entire life. Poor bull. He loves it. He loves the attention. We have documented that bull's entire journey. And, we've answered every tough question. We've shown the animal welfare side of it, the nutrition side of it, everything. I mean, we answer all of the questions that we can, and it's been really cool. And one day, I don't know, maybe last month, because I clearly had nothing else to do with my life, I got on social media and I added up all of the video views that Top Dollar has had, over the years, and he's, his videos have been viewed over 20 million times.
Wow,
and
that's pretty cool.
I think, yeah, he's an advocate. Yeah, he's actually very good at what he does, which is a blessing. But he truly has become an advocate for the sport, and he's introduced the sport to so many new people, and it's just been really fun. And we get messages from all over the world, and it's so funny. Even on big stages, whether it's FFA or whatever, I'm like, oh, wow. I think I did a good job. And the kids or, whoever, the adults will come up to me afterwards. I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have really impacted them and inspired them. And they're like, you're Top Dollar's mom. We love him. I'm like, okay, so yeah, did you enjoy my speech? They're like, yeah, anyway, so Top Dollar about him. Yeah. And it's so funny. I'm always like, oh my God, Top Dollar is so much more famous than I will ever be, that it's a very, he keeps me humble. Top Dollar keeps me humble.
Got to keep ourselves in check. I absolutely love that. Okay, well now I know Becca and I, our cow stories part aren't going to be as fun, but Becca, do you have? I know we only have dairy cows to reference from, but I feel like we've had some pretty cool ones. But Becca, do you have?
Yeah,
and I feel selfish or rude, narrowing it down to one. But do you have one that's just she's that girl?
I have two.
Oh, okay.
So one is kind of like Top Dollar in the sense that. We started off real
I have a guess of who yours two are.
And winning a lot, which has made everyone since then not a disappointment, but you couldn't be as good as Sneeze. So her name was Shanice, and it was our first Jersey cow, the little brown ones that we bought. And I had finally convinced my dad. I was like, hey, we're not winning with the black and white cows anymore. Can we please get a Jersey? They're so cool. They've got the personality. They're fun. They're spunky. So we buy this calf for much less than what she is worth, and she just kept winning, and she won intermediate champion at World Dairy Expo, and then kind of the Super Bowl of Jersey cows is the Jersey Jug in Louisville, Kentucky, and she won that. And I remember my husband,
I was there.
Yeah, you were there FaceTiming me because I was going to the Bahamas with my husband on his work
2
trip.
years ago, I think.
Yeah, I thought he was
2 or 3
on that trip. I should have gone to the Jersey Jug.
Screw the Bahamas.
But that was just so cool, and one of those moments of, oh shit, it is literally only down from here. But it's been amazing since. And then another cow who I remember so fondly, her name was Paris. She was one of our first cows that we had, again in Louisville at this show. I remember her and I had to have been 9, 10, 8, because Erin, our older sister, was still young enough. Her and I were wearing matching bandanas. And it was just such a fond memory of, she was a cow that, did well, but also was, easy to work with, and just was a fond memory. Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like
Janice makes sense.
I'm going to tell you who I think you're going to guess. There's two. After you tell me, I'll tell you if I got it right.
Okay, I thought you were going to talk about Desi, but I always get mixed up. So Desi was another black and white Holstein we had. And the fun thing about, and maybe it's this in other beef or horse, but with how we would always name animals, we would keep the same first letter for that family line. So you could easily kind of keep tabs. So Paris was the start of a really big like P family for us. And that was a huge family that we always kind of had. And then the D family as well was a big one. For me, I didn't have any of the P or the D family.
They were mine.
It sounds weird. Like, but my cow was Lyndon Locke James Sue. And she was just one of my longest cows that I ever had. We had her till she was about 12 or 13. And to me, she was like so amazing and so good. And she would win at, maybe local shows or regional shows and even some state shows. But you maybe look back and it's like, well, she couldn't go to World Dairy Expo, which is, the Super Bowl, the dairy world. But for me, that was my cow. She was with me. I got to show her forever. And she was a butthead a little bit sometimes. But it was funny, right? Like
She
sassy.
was.
She had an attitude. She had a
The
good.
good ones always are a little quirky. Yeah, a little quirky.
Yes.
The good ones are always quirky.
Yeah,
she was like a big old puppy dog.
Yeah, Sue was my girl. Just had her forever. And then I would say a current one. Now that we're into like the little brown cows, the Jerseys. There's a cow called Serena on my husband's family dairy farm in Georgia. And this cow, she literally is like a puppy dog. She will just follow you around and she always just wants attention. And it's like, I love that you love me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah. Sometimes like if Top Dollar is like not in the mood, we're like, get over here and love us.
Yeah.
Right now. And he's like got his back to us and he's like, oh my God, these women will not leave me alone.
I feel that. Becca, who did you think, was that in line with who you thought? Or?
I thought Sue and Shakira.
Okay, yeah. So Shakira was a heifer out of Sue, who was great, but then she passed on her first calving, so I did not get the chance to show her more. But we named her Shakira because her tail looked exactly like Shakira's hair.
I love that.
And it happened to start with an S. It was perfect.
That worked out well for you. Yeah, I love it. That's so cute.
Oh, well, okay. I'm glad we got to talk about dairy a little bit because I love the Western side. I love the Western sports and the bulls. They're all really, really cool, but that's our little tie into it as well. And
as dairy girls growing up, I remember being so envious of the livestock girls because they got to wear such cooler clothes and like we were always in
outfits.
white. And then even as we got older, it was, whether it was equestrian or the livestock or block and bridle at school, I just thought, man, why are we boring? Why do they get to be fun? So I think you've even influenced beyond, just Fancy Lady Cowgirl. I can start to see the Western influence and the fashion influence making its way into other, like dairy is letting it happen. And we're loving it.
Okay.
Dairy is finally letting it happen. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, you traditionally, what is the tradition behind the white?
Milkman. I just learned this recently.
I literally never knew that. That makes so much
I
sense.
just learned that
Really?
like the past month, and I can't even remember who told me that. I think it might have been.
So we didn't take any attention away from the animal.
No, Ruben just was it Ruben? Someone just randomly told me the story. Is
I need
that
to fact check
Milkman traditionally dressed in all white, right? Because that's kind of it represents like a pure, clean, healthy product. And then I think so people showing the cows, it was like an ode to the milkman. And I think that's where it's come from and that's where it's stuck. I literally just learned that. And now I think it might have been Ruben randomly.
That's so interesting. I love
crazy.
it. That's a party trick. I'm going to pop that party trick out.
Don't Google it and then it ends up being wrong. But that's what someone told us. Like, that makes sense.
I'm sticking with it. I'm like, my friend Emily told me and she is right.
She is a dairy girl. So no, but that's what I was told. I was like, that's so cool. And it makes a lot of sense now. And I was like, it makes me feel less lame wearing all white all the time. That just gets covered in cow shit so easily.
Yeah. White's a tough color to show livestock in. I will say that.
Terrible.
It's tough.
Yeah.
We try to make it work though. But wow, I've loved this conversation. I've loved everywhere it's gone. I've loved every aspect we've gotten to touch on and just hearing so much of your story, Courtney. And I know, again, I've always been inspired by it. I've always just loved to see where you've taken it. And for people to continue following along and seeing more of your journey and wherever that goes, where can people continue to find you on social, whether it's a website or if there's anything's upcoming that people can just continue to follow along with Fancy Lady Cowgirl?
Yeah, for sure. Well, everything is housed on my website, CourtenayDehoff.com. And it is the French spelling because my mom thought that was a good idea.
We'll put it in the caption too.
Put that in the captions. It is not spelled Courtenay like a normal person, but yeah, CourtenayDehoff.com. That's where I book all my speaking and things, and people can contact me through there. And then just Court Dehoff on social media, because I wasn't going to spell out my whole name because it's too hard to spell. So just Court Dehoff on socials. And yes, please connect. I would love to just connect with some of your audience and some of your dairy girls. And yeah, I just encourage all of the listeners to just embody the cowgirl spirit. You don't need to ride a horse. You don't need to live on a ranch. You don't need boots, but it's a state of mind. And so I just encourage, everyone to wake up and just have a little cowgirl courage.
Oh man, such a fun way to end it. Yeah, for anyone as well, on our side of things, as always, you can subscribe to the show, leave a review. As this was just such a fun one, and you can find us on social at all places at Cowgirl Talk. And yeah, just thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for listening. I know we only have a couple more episodes left for 2024, and I'm really glad we got to, have one of our last ones be with you, Courtney. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for telling us more about your journey.
Yeah, thanks, girls.
And as always, have a great day, cowgirls. Bye.
Bye.